Hello everybody, I'm Dave Mastny. I'm going to talk here about information security, protecting yourself in the digital age. We're going to cover quite a number of topics relating to protecting yourself online and electronic security and things like that. So a little bit about me. I've worked at Tri-C for quite a while, 14 years in a number of different IT roles. Before that I also worked at another educational institution in an IT capacity. The last 6 years I've been specifically focused on information security, and I do a wide variety of information security tasks, from offensive, defensive, pretty much anything you can think of. If it's information security related, I'm probably doing it here. I have a Bachelor of Science from the University of Akron in Industrial Management with a Management and Information System concentration. So let's get started. First I'm going to talk about email threats. I think we're all aware that email has some concerns with it, some threats, phishing being the big one. Phishing, most of us are probably aware what phishing is, but just in case anybody's not, I'm going to talk about it. So phishing is an attempt to obtain sensitive information for malicious reasons, usually by disguising yourself as a known entity, such as a company, a person that you already know, that sort of thing, over an electronic communication. And the ultimate goal of phishing is to steal usernames, passwords, to get you to do something that's going to result in malware being installed on your computer, or to get you to take a specific action, such as making a wire transfer, that sort of thing. According to the Verizon Data Breach Report of 2017, over 90% of incidents and breaches involved phishing. That's pretty staggering. So, what can we do about this? How can we protect ourselves from these sorts of malicious emails? I think the first step is to realize, what are the phishing tactics that they're using? What sorts of things are they doing to get us to take these actions? So typically one of the things that emails do is they're designed to get us to react quickly without a whole lot of thought, usually sort of to avoid some negative consequence. Your account's going to expire. You have like a huge bill, for example. You need to cancel that order before it's placed, figure out what's going on. And the other thing they do is they utilize the reputation of a known entity. So, Facebook, LinkedIn, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, etc. I have some examples up here of common themes of messages. This is certainly not a comprehensive list, but bills that you don't owe, but they say you do. A lot of times it's a big bill. You'll get a quick response, a click to see what's going on. Orders you didn't place. A lot of times there's IT themed messages, either from IT administrators, presumably, but not actually, or from IT systems, saying that your account's going to expire. There's been unusual activity detected on your account, that sort of thing. You might have friend requests that appears to be from Facebook, a LinkedIn request that's not really LinkedIn. There might be some sort of salacious theme. Are these pictures really of you? So those are some of the things that they do. The two big dangers of emails are URLs or links and attachments. So usually you can open up an email, and that's pretty safe to do. If you open an email and you have it set to automatically load images, which is typical, they might realize that you open the email, and they might send you more email, for example. But other than that, it's relatively safe. So, however, click on a link can end up having you infect your computer with malware or accidentally disclosing your password. So those are the two big risks. So what can we do to address these risks? Well, education's a big thing. And if there's one thing that you can take away from here, it's a little phrase that I stole called hover to discover. So if you move the mouse cursor over a link, I'm going to just do this right here, move the mouse cursor over a link, a little box will pop up to show you the website that it will go to if you click on that link. So if that website doesn't make sense in the context of the email, say you get an email from Tri-C and the link doesn't lead to a Tri-C site, that's kind of suspicious. Another thing is if it appears to be a URL, so like in this example right here, you can see it shows like haveibeenpwned.com, and you hover over it and it leads to a different site, that's also pretty suspicious. As far as attachments, you have to really think about opening attachments. That can be dangerous. If you do decide to open an attachment like a Microsoft Office document and you get a pop-up asking you to enable content, to run macros, you really don't want to do that. That's a bad idea. Macros are actually pretty rare, and if you got it in an email, then there's a very high chance that it's malicious. So don't do that. When you receive an email, you should be looking for the red flag warning signs. Is there anything odd about this? Is there a sense of urgency? If so, maybe I need to think twice, see what's going on, see if the message makes sense, if it's from if it appears to be from someone who's I should be expecting that sort of message. Is there odd language in the email? Certainly not all malicious emails are going to have odd language or misspellings. This isn't like 1999 when the biggest threat out there was emails from a Nigerian prince with terribly misspelled and horrible grammar. You still sometimes see those, but that's certainly not the norm anymore. And then another thing is, do the links in the email go to an unusual site, as I briefly mentioned before? Another thing to watch out for is you certainly have kind of generic threats, but there's also targeted threats, and I'm going to go into that in a little bit in depth. But there's a ton of information available about all of us online. So there have been all kinds of hacks where information's been breached, Equifax being the most recent big profile one, but there's also been a ton of other ones like Yahoo. All 3 billion user accounts got breached, Home Depot and Target, etc. So there's a ton of information out about us that people can use to target us, to craft specific emails to get us to take some sort of action. It's not just a general dear user, it's dear David Mastny who lives in whatever. So they have that information about us and they can use that to target us. There's also information on our social media pages and various other places. So check your privacy settings on your social media sites. As far as some other red flags, you'll want to verify the sender. So is it really who you think it is? In this particular case, I have an email, a typical email line. It shows 2 parts. You can see the first part, it says David Mastny, and that's just kind of like a descriptive thing that has my name. And then the second part is the actual email. So like when you go to a free site like Yahoo, Hotmail, or anything like that, when you create a free email account, it asks you for your name. You can type in whatever you want. They don't know who you are. So I could say, I'm Donald Trump. And then, I can have, certainly not going to have Donald Trump at whitehouse.gov, but the actual description part could say Donald Trump. And if someone's not paying attention, they're not looking at the address part, they might think it is someone who it's not. So take a look at the full email address and make sure it is who you think it is. Another thing is there's actually, email can be spoofed. So think of email as actual physical mail, like a letter. You can write whatever you want on the return address. That doesn't mean that you're that person. So email is the same way. You can spoof the actual sending address. Now if somebody replies to that, it's going to go to the actual sender, unless, which is my next point here, they have a different reply to address. You can actually have the from address and the reply address be different. And this is the sorts of things that we see in targeted attacks. And we've seen this here in targeted attacks against Tri-C. So these sorts of things are real, they're out there. You really need to be on your guard. Some other targeted things that they can do, if they want to pretend to be a particular person, organization, company, etc., they can actually go out and register a domain. And this is also something that we've seen. We're not Fort Knox, we're not like the White House or any other super high profile place. We're just a community college, and people are still targeting us. So you can bet that this thing is going on big time. It's happening to everybody, and we need to be on our guard. So somebody can take a domain, so vendor.com. They want to impersonate that. How can they do that? They can register vendor.net, or they can take some sort of substitution that looks really close. Like in this case, you can see the example here. I registered, it looks like vendor.com, but I've replaced the O with a 0. It looks very close. If you're not paying really, really close attention, it could appear that I'm actually sending email as that particular vendor.com. And then, on top of that, another threat is sometimes you might actually have an email from someone you know, I should say from the account of someone you know, and it might not actually be that someone you know because they may have had their email account compromised. This is actually, there's a threat called business email compromise, CEO fraud. It's not limited to that, but that's some of the places that it's used where the email of somebody, usually with a lot of power, will be compromised. And then they'll send emails out asking somebody to take a specific action, such as making a wire transfer, sending personal information. So you need to be super careful about that. If something's odd, call the person. Don't act. Moving on to attachments. Attachments are also quite dangerous. They can have exploits in them, which basically that means that if your document is, if your program that you're opening the document has a vulnerability in it, it can take advantage of that vulnerability and install malware on your computer. There's also Trojans, where instead of something actually being a document or something that you think it is, it's actually a program. And when you double click on that, instead of getting the document that you expect, you're actually installing a program. Some other tricks that they use, Office documents, especially Microsoft Office documents and Adobe PDF. They have some advanced features. They have macros, which are basically programs that are embedded within the document. And there's other functionality that can be used to run commands and download stuff from the internet. So you have to be super careful when opening attachments. Make sure that the contents make sense, that you're expecting the email, that it's from someone you trust, that it's not something that's designed with a high sense of urgency to get you to open it without thinking. Another thing that they can do, sometimes you'll get an email. It'll say, here's an encrypted file. And inside that email, they'll also tell you what the password is. Well, that doesn't really provide any security, because if you sent the file with the password, what's the point of encrypting it? So if you see that, that's kind of a red flag. One of the reasons they'll do this is because the email gateway's antivirus won't be able to scan an encrypted file because it's encrypted, so they won't know what's inside of that encrypted file. So watch out there. And then attachments can also be used to fish for passwords. They might actually just be a link that takes you to a website. They might have a pop-up that looks like a login box. Here's a photo example of that. If you ever see this, this is a huge red flag. So you'll never see an Office document that looks like this or anything like this. If it says this document's protected, this document's encrypted. If you want to view this encrypted document, run this macro. It gives you steps like that. So right here you can see macros have been disabled. Options, if you click enable run it, you've just infected your PC with malware. So this is not something you should ever see, especially from an email that you received on the internet. Here's one of the example actual email threats that we've seen at Tri-C. This particular email, they could have spent a little more time crafting it, but it's still enough to trick a few people. So in this email threat, you can see here, somebody used the name description. They made it admin, short for administrator, make it appear to be like it's coming from someone in IT. However, if you actually look at the email address, it's somebody at bell.net. Well, bell.net is not a domain name associated with Tri-C. So that is a huge red flag. They're asking you, it appears to be Tri-C, but the email address is not from Tri-C. That's a huge flag. Another oddity about this particular message, you can see that there's nobody in the to field. So this particular message appears to be to a particular person. It probably, it's not like a mass informational email that was sent out. It appears to be specifically addressed to them because it says you've made this request. But since there's nobody in the to field, that's kind of a red flag. Another red flag is that there's a generic salutation. It says, "Dear user." Well, they didn't take a whole lot of time there to see who you actually were. Supposedly, if you made a request to terminate your email, they might actually, inquire, use your name, that sort of thing. Some other things about this, the email itself doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So it says, "Our records indicate that you made a request to terminate your email." Why would I make a request to terminate my own email? And then why would you be sending me an email about it? That just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. If you take a look at the link in the email using the hover to discover technique, you move the mouse cursor over the link, wait for the little box to pop up. I've kind of done that in this screenshot. You can see that the website it's going to take you to, if you click it, is findprinters.co.uk. That's the United Kingdom website, clearly not a Tri-C website. And then lastly, the email has a sense of urgency, so it's kind of cut off right there. It says, "Please give us 2 hours. If you don't do this, your email account's gone." So, it wants you to click fast and without thinking. If you actually did click this link, this is where the ruse gets a little bit better, or at least, I should say, more convincing. If you look here, this is a clone of our login site. It's perfect. There's nothing wrong with it. It looks exactly like our website. There's really not a whole lot of clues here to give away that you're not on our website. So if you took the bait, you clicked on the link, you clicked on this, there's a good chance that you're going to try and log into this website. And if you do, you're actually giving your username and password to a hacker. There are a few signs that you can look at, however. So if you take a look in the address bar, there is no lock symbol. So anytime you're asked to enter sensitive information, in this case username and password, you should see a lock. And that basically means that the site, or the connection is encrypted, and that you're talking to the specific named site in the address bar, as long as you didn't get a certificate warning. In this case, you can see, if you take a look at that address bar, since that's really our only giveaway, you can see that it's not a Tri-C website. If you clicked on it without thinking, maybe now you're a little bit suspicious. You can see that's not a Tri-C website. If somebody had logged into this website, you would actually get redirected to our main webpage, not the Tri-C space, but actually the www.tri-c.edu, our public website. So that's what happened in this particular instance. Here's another targeted email threat. Again, we're not Fort Knox, but people are still after us because we have things, we have personal information. They can try and trick us out of money, whatever. So in this particular case, this email was crafted quite more convincing. You can see, they use our Tri-C logo right off our website. They've spoofed our email address, helpdesk@tri-c.edu. I believe that's one of our actual help desk emails. However, there's still a few signs, if you take the time, that give this away as an attack. So if you look at the description, the name of the account, it says Help Center, and the word center is spelled with the UK or the British spelling of the word center, which is a little bit of a giveaway. If you use the hover to discover technique, moving your mouse cursor over the link, you can see that this is going to take you to www.formlogics.com. Again, not a Tri-C website. And then looking at it a little bit further, there's some unusual wording, like the words kindly confirm. I think that's probably used a little bit more in other parts of the world, probably, like the UK, for example. It refers to university email. We're Cuyahoga Community College. We generally don't call ourselves university. So if you're looking at it closely, there's another sign. And then down at the bottom, it says ITS Center. We do have an ITS department, but we don't call ourselves ITS Center. Not a huge clue, but altogether, these things are adding up. It has a sense of urgency. And then lastly, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So it says there was an unusual sign into your university email account. Kindly confirm your location and login. Well, how does logging in confirm anything? It really doesn't. Moving on, some other targeted email threats. So there's some really nasty ones out there targeting real estate agents, title agencies, escrow companies, and their customers. So the scam goes like this. They hack one of those people, and when they're in the process of making their actual legitimate real estate transaction. They send them fake information to make the wire transfer payment for their loan. And that's terrible because the money is then sent to a third party, and the person is out the money, they don't have a house, and now they have a loan for a house that they don't have. So that's a terrible thing, and the main takeaway from this is if you're doing a high stakes transaction, never do it strictly on email alone. Make sure you get the information from multiple sources, that you can confirm you're actually talking to who you want. Just having an email from an email address, even if it's the correct address, doesn't mean it's the right person in control of that email address. Moving on, I'm going to talk about some website threats. So there's the threat that you could connect to the wrong website. You know, how did you get there? If you type it in the address bar, you know, you might mistype it and end up at a bad site. A lot of times people register similar common misspellings of websites in order to get, you know, make money one way or another, whether it's advertising, infecting people, whatever. There's also attackers know, you know, they can see what the top searches are, and they can actually use black hat search engine optimization to poison the search results of common, you know, top of the day things that people are searching for, and get them to click on links in the first page to take them to a site that's malicious. And then also, you know, when you're searching on a website, sometimes there's advertisements. So I might search for something specific, maybe even a company or product name. Somebody else can, say using Google, for example, you know, Google takes the highest bidder, and, you know, they give that search word to that person. So, you know, you might search for something, you might click the top result, that might actually be an advertisement, and it might not take you to where you think you're going to go to. Websites can infect your PC by serving malware. It's called drive-by download. If you're running a browser, a plugin, or something else that has vulnerabilities in it, just by visiting the website alone, you could result in having an infection on your PC. Another way that websites can present a danger is they can trick you into installing something. And one of the most common things is, in order to view this content, you need to install this updated plugin, with Adobe Flash being the most typical one. And that's something you should be wary of these days, because Adobe Flash is on its way out. They've said at some point they're going to stop supporting it, so they're probably not really updating it. I mean, they're making security updates for it, but they're probably not changing the format that you'll need to install an updated version in order to see any particular content. So if you ever see that, that's really highly suspect, and you probably should close your browser immediately. Even if you go to a good website, you know, the correct website that you intend to, you can still get infected, because websites themselves can be compromised, or more often they have advertisements on them, and those advertising networks sometimes have things slip by that can be used to infect your PC. We just had a very recent example of this with the Equifax and TransUnion websites. They had an analytics provider where they get data about people visiting their website, and that analytics provider was hacked and serving fake Adobe Flash updates threats. So you go to the website, you get a pop-up that says you need to install Adobe Flash update. If you click it, you end up with malware. So what are some precautions we can take? Keep your operating system, your web browser, and any plugins and other software up to date. If it's something that you're not using, uninstall it. The software that you have just sitting on your PC presents a risk in the fact that it could be exploited and compromised. Be aware anytime you're asked to install updated plugins, that's pretty suspect. You really shouldn't be seeing that a lot. You know, the web is moving to open standards, HTML5, where the browser should be able to support most of the functionality without any particular additional software being needed. I actually have an example here. I recommend against installing extensions to your web browser that you don't need. There's a link here that I'm not going to go to at the moment, but I'm going to have the slides available if you want, so you can check it out. But basically what happened is Google Chrome developers were getting compromised, And then their accounts were being used to push out updates to these browser extensions, so that people install the browser extension, they get a notification there's an update. The actual developer account who wrote the software was compromised and then used to push an update which got installed on people's PCs. So if you don't have a particular need for a browser extension, I wouldn't go just exploring them just for the sake of it, because there's been numerous instances of that happening. And then if you're on a website and you get a pop-up, you really shouldn't trust what those say, because there's a lot of things out there that are misleading, and they kind of take advantage of you in that regard. Another thing, as far as websites, you should only connect to trusted Wi-Fi networks. If you connect to a Wi-Fi network that doesn't belong to the organization that you're at, there's a chance you might actually be using someone else's Wi-Fi, and they might not have great intentions in mind. So you might not actually be on the website you think you are if you're using someone else's Wi-Fi. And then lastly, if you're entering sensitive information, credit cards, usernames, passwords, anything of that sort, make sure that you're using HTTPS. That will tell you that your connection's encrypted and you're connecting to the site that you think you are. If you get a certificate error, that's a huge warning flag. That means you're not talking to the site you think you are. Here's an example of a pop-up when visiting a website. If you ever see this or anything like this, it directs you to call a phone number to get support to remove a virus that you really don't have on your PC. If you ever see anything like this, there's tons of variants of it, but they're all pretty similar in that they tell you there's something wrong with your computer and to call right away for a technician. Those are suspect, so just go ahead and close your browser. You can get the same thing on your mobile device. So here's an example from an Android device. It says your phone has a virus. Please follow the instructions. It's kind of a pop-up. Don't follow those instructions. Go ahead and close the app, reboot your device, whatever you can, but don't follow the instructions. Next, I'm going to move on to protecting our online accounts. So going back to the data breach investigation report that Verizon released, it showed that 81% of hacking-related breaches leveraged stolen and/or weak passwords. That's huge. So how do passwords get stolen? There's a lot of different ways that passwords get stolen. There's keystroke loggers. You can hack another website. That information gets posted online. People tend to reuse the same passwords. Weak passwords that are guessable, either 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, using a password of LinkedIn for LinkedIn, using the word password, using my username or anything like that, using information that's on my social media website, say my anniversary, that's guessable because I have that information out there. So something we should do, we should have a different password for every website. The reason for this is we know there's been tons and tons and tons of hacks out there. All these websites get hacked, and one of the big things that gets leaked is usernames and passwords. And as an attacker knows, people use the same password on multiple websites, and they have tools to test this. So, it's not some guy like sitting there typing every username and password in over and over again. They have tools that do this. They'll check and say, hey, this password works on the following sites. So, hugely important. This thing does happen all the time. Another thing, treat security questions as passwords. So, different websites have the ability to reset your password. One of the things they use are security questions. You answer the security question, they'll let you reset the password. Well, a lot of the questions they ask are kind of lame, things that can be guessed or looked up, on your social media site, on ancestry websites and other things like that. They can get your birth date, your family members, your mother's maiden name, whatever, that sort of thing. So treat those as passwords. And then choose strong passwords for all of your important accounts. I'm going to go on that in a little bit more detail on a future slide. Also, choose or use two-factor authentication for your critical websites. Anything that's hugely important, you need to make sure you're using two-factor. Two-factor authentication is basically a second way to verify your identity besides something you know, which is your username and password. It's also something you have, typically your cell phone, and your cell phone can receive like a one-time code that happens when you log in, or you launch an app to get a one-time code when you log in, something along those lines. And the reason that, besides your financial account, that's pretty obvious why you'd want to do it there. But you also want to do it on your email account, because your email account is a link to all of your other accounts. Why? You can reset. Most sites have the password reset functionality linked to your personal email account. So you go to your website, you click forgot your password, it sends you a link to your email. Attackers have a list of all of your emails. They know what accounts you have. If they compromise your email, they can compromise any linked sites that email is using. Another thing, hackers know how most people choose passwords. So what do people choose first for a password? They choose the base of the password, a word, password. And can anybody guess what's typically the next part of a password that people choose? What's that? Exactly. You need a number. Most people are going to take a number. You're going to put it right after the word. Password 1. You need a capital letter. Which letter are the people going to make capital? The first letter. You need a symbol. Someone's most likely going to put it at the end. There's a good chance it could be an exclamation point. So, I mean, within this room, we know how most people choose passwords. Hackers also know how people choose passwords. So we want to make sure that we mix it up a little bit. We do something a little bit different from this formula that's widely used in order to reduce our risks. For sites that require password changes, what changes do people make to their password in order to remember it and yet change it? Exactly. They change the number. They increment the number. So if you're choosing a password for different sites, another thing that hackers realize is that some people have clued on to the fact that maybe they shouldn't be using the same password at different sites. So something that is typically common, they'll take like a base password and then adjust it for that particular website. So for example, for try-C, I might have password 1, try-C. For Amazon, I might have password 1, Amazon. That's a typical formula. So again, that is better than using the same password on every site, but it's also kind of predictable, so you have to watch out for that. So first I'm going to talk about some tips for what not to do when selecting a password, things you should avoid, and then next I'm going to talk about things that you should do. So when you're selecting a password, avoid using basically that formula that we talked about. Don't use a dictionary word with a number at the end. Don't include your username or the service name, so not try-C, not Mastny. Avoid using keyboard patterns. They seem like they're strong passwords, but it's also something that's widely known, widely utilized. QWERTY, 1QAZ, whatever keyboard pattern it is, someone's used it, and it's something that they test for. Watch out for character substitution, so like using the @ sign instead of an A. We know about, hackers know about that. And avoid using the word password or any form of it. Don't excessively repeat any single character. And don't include the season, month, and year or anything like that. And don't include information that's obtainable from your social media. So, oops. I'm going to provide some possible password creation strategies. There's many more out there, but here's 2. So first one is using a passphrase. You choose a phrase, you select the first letter of each word, and then throw in a number or 2. So for example, here's a random phrase that I came up with. I like jelly beans and gumdrops at 8 o'clock. You could use the password, selecting the first letter and replacing some of the characters. So ILJB and, replacing the and with an ampersand, replacing the @ with the @ symbol, and the word 8 with the numeral 8. And there I have a password. Another password creation strategy is just taking a whole bunch of words, random words, and concatenating them together. And that basically uses the sheer length strategy. It's a lot to type in, not too hard to remember, generally. The key thing here is that uniqueness is important. if a password's been leaked out there, there's dictionaries, there are things that attackers try when they try and crack passwords. So if you're using a password that nobody else is using, it's a good password. Free software, moving on, free software. You have to be careful when you get software off the internet that's free, because sometimes when things are free, you are the product. So they want to make money off of you one way or another. Sometimes they include some nasty little add-ons, some potentially unwanted programs, adware, things that pop up programs. So you want to be careful. You'll want to think about, how did you get there, to this particular site? If it was Adobe Flash update, did you click on something that was on a website, or did you go to Adobe's website to get it? There's a website called virustotal.com, and it allows you to basically upload a file, and it'll scan it with 60-something different antivirus engines and give you a result back. And that, if you get a clean scan there, that'll be a pretty good sign that that software is safe to install. Here's an article that I read about. They were searching for a free PDF to docx converter, and of the top 3 of the first 5 search results that they tested out, they created, the documents that were created using the program contained malware. And even the top download sites, they seem pretty trustworthy, but they're not necessarily clear of potentially unwanted programs. They can sometimes have things in that weaken your security, that do undesirable things, that spy on you, create ads. The situation's actually improved in the last couple of years. Several of the sites that used to do that aren't doing it as much or at all, but they're still out there. So another thing we can do to secure ourselves, we can reduce the impact of what happens if we actually do get malware. And one of the ways that we can do this is by running as a restricted user or a standard user instead of administrator. We can have 2 accounts. So we can have an administrator account for when we need to install software, and then we can run as a standard user all the other time. And the reason that we would want to do this is because standard users don't have the ability to make system-wide changes. So if my standard user gets infected, all I have to do is log in as a different user, and that malware is no longer running. It only, it doesn't have access to have things start up at boot, doesn't have access to make system-wide changes. It can only infect the documents that it has access to. So that would generally be, the My Documents folder of that particular user. And if there's, if the PC is shared by multiple people, if there's a shared amongst all the family members folder, it would have access to that. But it wouldn't be able to access anything within the other user accounts. Right here, you can see there's a screenshot of the manage accounts. You can follow the little trail there. So you go into control panel, user accounts, and then user accounts again. You go to manage accounts, and you can see there's 2 user accounts here. You can see the one is administrator and one is not. So I mentioned use 2 accounts. If you go in here into the manage accounts, you click change an account. You can see the link that says change an account type that allow you to change whether the account is an administrator or a standard user. And that's something great if you have kids, to have your kids run as a restricted user. You probably don't want your kids to be able to install software and possibly mess up the entire computer. So you can at least limit the impact of if something bad happens by running as a restricted user. And then here's another screenshot of if you click that button, how to change between standard and administrator account. Another thing we need to watch out for, phone scams. So you should never receive a call from Microsoft, from Apple, tech support, and telling you that you have a virus. They're just not going to call you unless you called them first. If you get a call from the IRS demanding that you pay your taxes immediately, that's pretty suspect. That's probably not going to happen. If you won something and you didn't even sign up to win it, that's obviously pretty suspect. There's phone scams involving, the police. If you don't pay this fine right away, we're going to arrest you. Attorneys and things like that. So you have to watch out for phone calls, because it's not always who it seems that you're talking to who you think you are. Caller ID can be spoofed, and there's services out there that do this and make it real easy. There's phone cards that you can get. You call in the number, you type in the phone number you want to appear as, and then you call the number you want, and you appear to be that phone number. So be aware that caller ID can be spoofed. You're not always talking to who it appears you are. And this is probably something that you might already be aware of. It's becoming more and more common that the scammers will call you appearing to be from a number in the same area code as you to make it more likely that you'll answer. Some other phone scams out there for people who've been in hotel rooms. For example, someone was playing a nasty prank and said they were the hotel desk. They said there was some sort of emergency, a gas leak or whatever, and you need to break your window and get out now. You really need to be careful because you break that window. It doesn't matter that it wasn't the front desk. You're still at fault. Online scams, there's all kinds of online scams out there. Cash advance is one of the typical ones where you go to Craigslist, eBay, you're selling something online or in person, and somebody says, oh, I already wrote out the check for more than you're asking for it. You can just pay me the difference and then cash the check and keep the rest. Well, then the cash bounces and you're out the money you gave them and your money. There's all kinds of work at home scams. You got to be really careful for those. If you have to pay money up front, that's a big red flag. If your work at home job involves cashing a lot of checks, wiring money elsewhere, there's a good chance you're being part of an online fraud ring. You're somebody's money mule, so watch out for that. Same thing with reshipping and repackaging items. You might be helping somebody to make money through stolen goods or goods purchased using stolen credit cards. There's dating scams, so beware of online dating scams. If you never met the person and you strike up an online romance or whatever, and then all of a sudden somebody starts asking for money or for photos that you wouldn't want the world to see, you have to watch out for that. Some of these dating scams are even so advanced that they have call centers where they'll have somebody, they'll say, oh, I need money, please call me, and they'll have a call center in another country set up where someone will answer that phone and pretend to be the particular person in the scam that you have this supposed online romance with. Email scam, some more email scams, things that are too good to be true. You need to watch out for those. I have millions to give you. Get a new iPad for $10. Investment schemes and things like that we've all seen. Moving on to protecting our mobile devices. So things we can do there. Only install apps from the official app store. If you have the ability to turn off installing them elsewhere, turn them off. Don't install them from anywhere else. Do not root or jailbreak your device. That basically means installing things with super user privileges. On your phone, you're basically running as a restricted user, or actually all the apps are running as restricted users. If there are software updates, install them in a timely manner. I know iOS is pretty good about this, Android not as much. You might actually want to take that into consideration when you're buying a mobile device. Make sure that you're getting one that's going to have security updates for a while. Use a PIN or password with a short timeout. If supported, use encryption on your device. It's kind of becoming default these days for the most part. If you're connecting to Wi-Fi networks, make sure you're connecting to a trusted Wi-Fi network. And then when you go to get rid of your device, make sure you wipe it and factory reset it before you sell it so that all your data is not out there. Another important thing is protecting our data. So we all know we should back up our data. Backing up our data is incredibly difficult. We just never seem to get around to it. We don't do it often enough. So one of the things that I recommend is, I think there's not a whole lot of places online that I spend money with, but I spend money to keep online backups of my computer. I have an online backup service. It automatically backs up my PC constantly, keeps multiple versions of files, and that way if my hard drive ever dies, if I get malware and everything gets wiped out, I still have a copy that I can go back to. You can have an extra hard drive, but if that hard drive's connected to your computer and you get malware, it could be wiped. There's a good chance that you probably didn't take a backup of whatever, whenever you last needed it. If you have a fire in your house and that hard drive's in there, it doesn't do you any good because it got burned up with it. So online is really a good way to go. Social media, be careful about what you share. Don't use anything that could be an account secret, whether password or security question or the password idea. Check your privacy settings. Beware of romance scams, and be careful about what you post online. Protect yourself by using a credit card if you can. Not everybody is up for that, but one of the problems with debit cards is that while you might not be out the money, if somebody skims your card, you don't have access to it because it's directly linked to your bank account. So you might have checks bounce and things like that, and you won't be able to get to your actual money until things get straightened out. And then lastly, if you're using an ATM, if somebody has an ATM skimmer, they also, besides needing your card number, they also need your PIN, and usually they capture that with a camera, a little teeny camera hidden somewhere nearby. So if you just cover the keypad when you type your PIN in, then you've protected yourself potentially from that particular threat. And then, here's something that we're probably all pretty familiar about with the recent Equifax breach: protecting your credit and your identity, your social security number, things like that. You can check your credit reports for free by going to the official government-mandated website, annualcreditreport.com. You can place a credit freeze on your account, and that basically means that nobody can check your credit or open up lines of credit with a particular lender. You have to do this for each of the big lenders, the Equifax, the TransUnions, and the like. For the time being, it requires a $5 fee, which Equifax is waiving, but the other ones still charge. I suspect, in the near future, that Congress might have something to say about that. But at this point in time, it still costs money. You should monitor your existing credit card and bank accounts to make sure there's no charges that you didn't place. And then this is kind of sad, but it's just the reality of the world we live in. If you file your taxes early, you can prevent the chance that someone else, or reduce the risk that someone else will file your tax for you and get your tax refund. And then, I was at the Tri-C Benefits Fair, and they had several pamphlets, and I noticed that there was something for Tri-C employees, Impact Solutions, Employee Impact Assistance. It's also offered pretty common benefit, I think, for a lot of employers. They actually have some identity theft prevention and recovery services, and I have a flyer up here if anybody wants to take a look, and the information up there on this slide. So in summary, when you receive email, be careful, scrutinize it, even if it appears to be from someone you know. Think twice before opening attachments. Use the hover to discover to see where a link's going to go before you open it. Use an online cloud backup service to protect your data. Be careful of what you share on social media and make sure you check your privacy settings. Be careful of downloaded software. Scan it with virustotal.com before you go to install it. It's safe to download as long as you don't run it. Beware of unsolicited phone calls, and remember that caller ID can be spoofed. When you're making a transaction at an ATM, cover the keypad when you're typing your PIN in. Use different passwords for every site. Set up two-factor authentication for financial sites and email. Keep your software up to date, and run as a standard user, not an administrator. One of the things that a lot of people say is that, I don't care if I get hacked because I don't have anything of value. Well, here's a little slide that I just included to show that you are a target and you do have something of value. Even if you don't have money, you have your reputation, you have your email account. Your email account has contacts in it. People can use your email to harvest your contacts and then email as you something in order to get those other people to do something. And there's all kinds of things in here. I'm going to provide the slides. They're online, so you can take a look at this on your own if you're interested. Do we have any questions?
Dave, I have a question. Do you recommend any password vault services or that are online? Because a lot of people have a lot of passwords that might be on sticky notes underneath their keypad. Is there an efficient way to store those passwords, keep them safe and secure?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the question was about how to store passwords securely. So yeah, there's a variety of software out there that you can use. to manage your passwords. I wouldn't recommend using Excel or anything like that. There's password managing softwares, Password Vault, KeyPass, and numerous other products out there, LastPass, OnePass. There's a whole variety of password managers that securely store your passwords. It is something that I would recommend for people who are at least a little bit more savvy, because you store your passwords all in one place. It's a pretty attractive target. So it's not a perfect solution, but it works good for people who are more technically savvy. And there's free solutions out there that are good. So Bruce Schneier has one, I think, that's called Password Vault. And then KeyPass is another one that's widely used. That's also free. And then there's paid services out there that do it as well. For the not so technically savvy, you could keep your passwords written down in a secure place, not in your keyboard. I'm more so talking about home users. We don't really advocate that here at Tri-C. But it certainly, is an option. Yes?
I have a question. We go into Office 365, does it have a two authentication system? So I'll go to 365.tri-c.edu, and then it does ask for my email address and my password, so that's really just one thing, right? Is there a way to get it 365 to have a two-system login?
Yeah, so the question was about Office 365 and two-factor authentication. Yes, so Office 365 does support two-factor authentication. That's something that has to be enabled, in the tenant and for a particular account. That is something that we might take a look at some point, and definitely, I'd definitely like to see it. I'm sure not everybody would be as excited about it as you.
So can I enable it myself?
That's something I'll have to look into. You definitely could take a look at it. Any other questions? Okay, thanks.